Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Quirkless Deku had the Force Part 2. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, JedIzuku from AO3. So let's start the video. Izuku hated warp quirks, especially when he wasn't prepared to be transported. This was not his first time, and teleportation tended to jumble the force unnaturally. As he felt the teleportation process ending, he was still on top of 𝐲𝐸, but as soon as the force rushed back to him, he felt they were surrounded by malicious people. Izuku quickly backflipped to standing, and as soon as his feet touched the ground, on either side of 𝐲𝐸, he extended both arms straight out from himself and force pushed. If the force was a quirk, this would have been a super move because the push was out in 360 degrees around him, leaving 𝐲𝐸 untouched on the ground. The people surrounded them all went flying backward, some as much as 20 meters. Those were the lucky ones. The unlucky ones crashed strong into the nearby walls or dirt piles. Glancing around quickly, it looked like they were in a mudslide of some sort. Izuku reached down and helped 𝐲𝐸 up. "Are you okay?" 𝐲𝐸 nodded as Izuku continued to scope out the situation. "We've got this." Izuku raised his voice so everyone could hear him. "If anyone wants to surrender, now is your only chance." There was some laughter from the villains who had surrounded them, as they pulled themselves up. "You got lucky, brat," one of the villains said. "Strong way it is then. You take the ones on the right, I'll take the ones on the left," Izuku said to 𝐲𝐸 and then moved. 𝐲𝐸 shot ice out towards the villains, and Izuku lifted a few and tossed them back into a wall again. One villain had a long-range quirk and seemed to be shooting pellets of some sort directly at Izuku and 𝐲𝐸. Using the force, they hit an invisible wall, landing in a small pile by his feet. Keeping that defense up limited what Izuku could do offensively. Izuku glanced for a solution as he was defending from the pellets and saw a bulky villain that appeared to be made of crystal. Izuku lifted him and swung the villain into the line of fire of the other villain. The crystalline villain screamed at the motion, but the pellets didn't seem to affect his thick skin. Izuku tossed the villain made of crystal towards the shooter and they both landed with a crash. The crystal villain started to move like he was getting up, but Izuku lifted him off, then ground and smashed him back down into it. He did not stir after that. Using his telekinesis, he made short work of the villains in his view until all of them were unconscious or incapacitated. Izuku felt in the force that 𝐲𝐸 was fine, but there was an air of worry about him. Izuku looked his way. Most of the villains were stuck in mini glaciers of ice. A few were knocked out from Izuku's initial attack. The force assured Izuku that the danger had passed and the villains fighting them were done. All in all, the fight took less than a minute and neither he nor 𝐲𝐸 had a scratch on them. "Good job. We're a great team," Izuku said. "Yeah. Let's see what they know." 𝐲𝐸 walked over to one of the shivering villains covered in his ice. "Why are you here?" "Screw you, kid." Izuku rolled his eyes. "You're going to tell us why you are here?" He may have used the force a little bit to encourage his compliance. This only worked on weak-minded individuals, but Izuku wasn't too worried. "We're here to kill All Might," the villain said. 𝐲𝐸 let out a derisive snort. "You realize the two of us have been in high school for less than a week and we had no trouble taking you all out. What chance do you stand against All Might? Not everyone was fighting Endeavor's spawn. Do you think all your little friends can handle this as well you can?" "Ha!" Izuku and 𝐲𝐸 shared a look. The villain was not wrong. Depending on the matchups and which zones their classmates ended up, there could be trouble. 𝐸 in the fire zone would be terrible. Kaminari in the rain would be bad for everyone. There were a lot of potential issues. There must be a plan though. You all are street thugs. You'd need several really powerful villains working together if you wanted to take down All Might, 𝐲𝐸 said. "Oh, there's a plan, all right. We have a monster which can take on All Might. Or something. I wasn't paying attention. They said come to see All Might killed and I was sold." Charming, Izuku said. Shoto, let's go to the central plaza. I don't think Aizawa-sensei will be able to hold his own indefinitely. Shoto nodded and Izuku used the force to find the best path. He started in the right direction and Shoto followed. Every now and again there was another villain, but Izuku or Shoto made short work of them. At one point Izuku realized he was going a bit too fast for Shoto to keep up, so he moderated his pace. While he was ahead of Shoto, Izuku subtly assembled his lightsaber and hid it in his sleeve for easy access should the need arise. He didn't feel the presence of a Sith, but there was something dark ahead. As they got closer and closer to the center plaza, the darkness in the force grew and grew. It was suffocating, there was great evil there. He could see the end of the landslide zone now, and they continued. Hey Shoto, Izuku said. I know this is a touchy subject for you, but I need to bring it up. There is a great evil ahead, I can feel it. Shoto looked like he wanted to ask how Izuku could feel that, but Izuku continued. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we may need to go all in. I'm ready. I know you're very strong, but your fire may be needed to win this fight. I want to say this now when I can. I made an oath never to use my father's fire. First, it's your power, not his. Second, are you prepared to die? Let Aizawa-sensei or me die to honor that oath. I don't know if it will come to that, Shoto, but I want you thinking about it. Shoto didn't say anything for a few minutes as they continued to walk. After a while, he said, My mother has been on my mind a lot since we had that talk after school the other day. I haven't seen her since I was a small child. In all my memories of her, she was crying. My father ruined her, I see that now. The last time I saw her she poured boiling water on my face after telling me that my left side looked too much like my father. He reached up and touched the scar on his left side gently. Since then, I've never used my fire. Izuku stopped walking and turned to his friend. He didn't know what to say. Can I hug you, Shoto? Why? Shoto's confusion made Izuku's heart ache. Pain was rolling off the other boy, which Izuku felt clearly in the force. You seem like you could use one. Shoto paused then nodded. Izuku hugged Shoto for a few seconds and he could tell it helped because the pain lessened enough that Izuku could feel some awkwardness in the force. Not to mention that the other boy's arms stayed at his side. He let go. Shoto, I can't know what you've gone through, I can't tell you, it will feel better eventually. I can say is that you have friends who care about you, myself included. Cutting off a part of yourself for so long is never a good idea. I promise I will not ask you to use your fire unless it's the only thing I can think of to save lives and get us out of here in one piece. Izuku paused. I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You've gone through so much and here you are wanting to be a hero and help others. I'm glad to know you, Shoto. You'll be an amazing hero. Shoto was quieter than normal after that. When they reached the main plaza, Izuku saw a fountain. Some of the villains seemed to be gathered there, many of them collapsed on the ground in front of their homeroom teacher. Izuku led Shoto to the side where they could sneak closer without being seen. As they got closer, they began to pick up on the conversation between Aizawa and some of the villains who didn't seem to be doing much more than watching. The warp villain was there as well as a scruffy-looking man with white hair covered in hands. But the worst was standing next to them, with a dead look in its eyes. It was what was giving off the dark side feelings. It is almost a void, in any light around it. Surprised you could handle so many at once, Eraserhead. Goes to show you how skilled some pros are. But it won't be enough. No one had even slowed me down so far. Even though Aizawa said this, Izuku could tell he had taken some damage from the fight. Let's you how you do against our anti-symbol of peace. Nomu, kill Eraserhead. In a flash, the black monster, Nomu apparently, sped over to Aizawa readying a punch. Izuku didn't think, he acted. Before the Nomu could finish its punch it halted all motion. Izuku grabbed the Nomu with the force and lifted it off the ground. Oh, some new NPCs. The white-haired villain said. Come to fight the player, have you? Surrender. You've lost, villains. Izuku said. The villain laughed. Did you hear that, Kurojiru? They think we should surrender. What do you think? I think we still have the upper hand, Tomura Shigaraki. Isn't that 𝐻𝐸 heavy, little hero? Your quirk must be getting tired. What will you do when you can't hold it anymore? The 𝐻𝐸 was heavier than Izuku thought. He'd be fine holding it for a while, as the force didn't work at all like a quirk. It lacked some of the downsides or kickbacks that many quirks had. But it required focus. There was steel in his voice as Izuku said, underestimate us at your peril. You need to get out of here, Aizawa said. These are not low-level villains. They are the leaders. We are the leaders. And since All Might's not here, we need to make a statement somehow. So little telekinetic NPC, release my 𝐻𝐸 and I promise your death will be quick. Or, well, maybe not, but I don't care. Some of the villains that Aizawa had already taken out were coming to and grouping up to attack again. Izuku was still lifting the 𝐻𝐸, keeping it from attacking. Sensei, we'll take the low-level thugs. You deal with the big threats. Shoto, go left. Shoto nodded and went to the left of the crowd of villains. Izuku sent him, that was because his right side would be towards the group. Izuku went right towards the fighting in concert with Shoto. He was doing less than he had before because he was still keeping the 𝐻𝐸 lifted. It required some of his focus, so he was helping herd the villains for Shoto to freeze. A push here, a shove there, and before long all the villains were taken care of. He and Shoto did make a pretty good team. Turning back, it seemed that Aizawa-sensei was more injured than Izuku thought because the white-haired villain was reaching towards his downed teacher. Izuku had no idea what Shigaraki's quirk was. The villain was just about to touch his teacher's arm with 5 fingers when Izuku grabbed him with the force and lifted him next to the 𝐻𝐸. You're getting very annoying for an NPC, little telekinetic. You're ruining all my fun. Your plans are monstrous, as is your 𝐻𝐸. It seems unnatural, not just a mutant quirk. What is it? Shigaraki smiled wide beneath the hand covering his face as he floated gently above the ground. It is a genetically modified All Might killer. It can do everything the so-called symbol of peace can, but better. So it's not an actual person. No, it's a genetic machine of destruction. Each hand has enough power to level a building in one punch. Well, that makes this easier, Izuku said. He might not need his lightsaber after all, but its presence was still comforting in his sleeve. The thing Izuku learned about telekinesis as he was working to MSTR it was that there is not much that cannot be done if you apply enough force. A Jedi could also do a lot with it on a micro level. Stopping a BLD vessel in the brain was one example of a technique that a Jedi would not use but was capable of. Another example was asphyxiation. Using force though, that was something he was able to do easily. Even though the beast was genetically modified, needless killing was not the Jedi way. So instead, Izuku began to pull on the beast's arms. The 𝐻𝐸 felt like it was not held together very strongly, and it was suddenly T-posing with an inhuman whine coming from it. Everyone was looking at the 𝐻𝐸 as its arms were pulled out of their sockets. This was not a very Jedi-like thing to do, but without using his lightsaber there was not much he could do. It was an abomination of the dark side, not even sentient. Black goo, BLD maybe, dripped down as Shigaraki just laughed. Keep using your quirk and soon you won't have any power left. My 𝐻𝐸 can counter anything you do to it. Shock absorption, super strength, speed, and regeneration. My 𝐻𝐸 has it all. Shigaraki said. Izuku wasn't sure at first why the villain was laughing until the arms slowly started to regrow. First, they were little stumps but then suddenly they were fully formed again. Okay, maybe Izuku would need his lightsaber after all. Would the healing work if it was cauterized? His cover as a Jedi at this school was not worth the lives of any of the students or teachers. It would be a shame that he had not uncovered anything about the Sith, but this creature needed to be stopped. Why don't you just let us down so we can play? You're annoying me by keeping me floating here. I can do this all day, Izuku replied. Shigaraki, I can warp him away and his grip on the Nomu and you will probably end. While the villains were talking, Izuku saw that Tsu and Kaminari were hiding in nearby bushes. He whispered to Shoto, go get them and tell them to get Aizawa out of here. I will need your help before the end, but we need to help our teacher. I can handle this for a minute, I'll distract them. Shoto nodded and Izuku wandered over towards the gathered villains. They paused in their conversation and looked at him. He had moved enough so Aizawa was no longer in their line of sight. He felt in the force but didn't look at his classmates moving across the plaza towards their teacher. This is getting us nowhere. Why don't you just leave? You will not win. You really are an annoying NPC. Maybe you're a boss after all. I can't tell. You have power and the will to use it. Why be a hero in this evil system we have now? You don't even sound like a native Japanese speaker. I almost need the subtitles on to understand you. To serve is the highest calling of humanity. And how could helping others ever be seen as bad? And I am American. Listen to him, Kurojiiri, he sounds so pure, like a Jedi or something. Yes, Shigaraki. What shall we do with him? He's boring me. Send him away. Before the warp villain could make a portal, Izuku jumped to the side, further obscuring the fact that his classmates were helping their teacher to safety. He tossed the Nomu with his telekinesis directly at the warp villain. There was a clang and both monster and villain were sent flying into the lake. Nomu. Kurojiiri. You are a pest. The still floating villain said to Izuku. And you moved Eraserhead to safety too. This isn't fair, you've been studying to be a hero for like a week. You'll find I'm full of surprises. Izuku let the villain land on the ground. And released his grip. He could use a little time to recover some energy. I was warned this wouldn't be as easy as Sensei told me it would be, Shigaraki said. They said that something was blocking their view. Some reason they couldn't see the outcome. Who? Izuku asked, hoping the villain would tell him. The Sith. They are so stupid and cryptic. But the Sith aren't real, they're bedtime stories parents use to scare kids into being good. That's what the Jedi tell everyone, but they are very real. I should have brought one. They could have handled you. Versatile fighters can do more than just lift and throw people. After we kill All Might, sadly, the villain's monologue was interrupted by one of Kurojiiri's portals opening nearby. Water started pouring out and soon the Nomu and warp villain were back in the plaza. Thankfully Shoto had returned to his side and so he was ready. They were standing close so Izuku whispered, freeze the Nomu in as thick of a block as you can and then dodge to your left because the portals could be a problem. Shoto squeezed Izuku's arm in confirmation. I'm glad you're back, Kurojiiri. Nomu, kill the annoying NPC, said Shigaraki. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results, Izuku said as he lifted the Nomu again so it couldn't move. Water still covered the floor of the plaza and the Nomu was dripping. Shoto. And with his name, Shoto stepped forward and put his right foot down strong and a giant block of ice appeared where the Nomu was standing. Shigaraki dodged to the side as the ice got larger and Kurojiiri was swallowed in it. Wow, Izuku said. That's impressive, Shoto. Shigaraki looked so done, some of the hands on his body were askew. You DMN kids. I'm going to end you. It was not supposed to be this difficult. Shigaraki charged towards Shoto and Izuku but Izuku used the force to push the villain back. It would have sent him flying into the lake, but suddenly Shoto's iceberg shattered and Izuku used the force to put up a shield and grabbed Shoto to make sure he stayed behind it. The other boy looked confused for a second as to why none of the ice was hitting where they were, but then saw a pile of it in front of them. After the explosion passed, the Nomu was free and Izuku took his grip on Shoto and pushed him out of the way as the Nomu appeared right in front of him. He tried to stop the monster but he was just a second too slow and took a pretty strong punch to his gut before he pushed it away, as he did with Shigaraki. That would have been a lot worse if he had been even half a second later. It would leave a bruise but that was all. 𝐲𝗏 stood up and looked at Izuku as he again lifted the 𝗨𝗻 into the air. What do we do? I'm not 100% sure, 𝐲𝗏. Fire might work, but I don't even know. It could cauterize it and we may be able to overwhelm the regeneration ability it has. But I don't know if that will work and I don't want to ask you to break your oath for no reason. 𝐲𝗏 didn't say anything for a moment. The villains were talking to each other but Izuku was too focused on 𝐲𝗏 to hear what they were saying. Suddenly the force cried out in alarm and Izuku shoved 𝐲𝗏 one way and went another as the warp villain's blackness appeared where they had been standing. I hate teleporters, Izuku said more under his breath than to anyone and he sent a very powerful force push towards the black misty villain. He again disappeared towards the lake as 𝐲𝗏 stood again. I'll do it. It's my power, 𝐲𝗏 said. DMN right it is, Izuku replied with a smile as he moved the 𝗨𝗻 to directly in front of 𝐲𝗏. Suddenly the world was awash in flames. Izuku started to pull the arms off the 𝗨𝗻 again while it was being bathed in fire. It was easier this time as if they were weaker than the beast's original arms. They plopped off with the same black gooey blood leaking out, but this time before they could regrow, the wounds were burned over and nothing but tiny little stumps came out. Izuku felt bad for harming the creature, but it was a life-or-death situation and Shigaraki screamed at them and began to charge when Izuku sent another force push at the villain. The 𝗨𝗻 seemed to no longer be regenerating but was still giving off the same evil feelings it had been the entire fight, weaker but not dead. Izuku looked over at 𝐲𝗏 and can feel he is starting to overheat. That's good enough. You're getting too hot. When you stop, encase it in ice again, but maybe less this time. It'll also help you cool down a bit, right? 𝐲𝗏 nodded and stopped the fire and froze the now armless 𝗨𝗻 in place. Shigaraki was screaming about cheats and charged towards Izuku and 𝐲𝗏. Izuku stepped between 𝐲𝗏 and where the villain was charging at them. Izuku pushed him back with the force and he skid to a halt a dozen meters away as Kurogiri teleported himself back to the plaza, water draining back towards the lake. I am quite finished with these two students, Tamura Shigaraki. Where is 𝗨𝗻? Kill them. They burned it and froze it. I think its arms won't grow back again. They ruined everything. Not even cheaters but exploiters. Hackers. Ban them, Kurogiri. I will send them far away, maybe to the middle of the ocean. That would be fitting. I don't care, get rid of them and then we'll leave. This is a bust, game over I guess. Izuku again grabbed 𝐲𝗏 and was ready to pull him to the side and out of the warp villain's line portals. He was out of tricks at this point and if the 𝗨𝗻 broke free again Izuku wasn't sure what he could do short of taking out his lightsaber and decapitating the monster. That Sith is going to be so insufferable. He said this wouldn't work. DMN him and his foresight. Okay, Kurogi, the door to the USJ chose that moment to burst open. It's alright. Why? Because I am here. All Might's voice reassured them and at the same time, several of Izuku's classmates appeared by his and 𝐲𝗏's side. All Might seemed to be in several places at once, bounding from one place to the next, in less than 10 seconds incapacitating several clumps of villains. Everyone, get to the main entrance. All Might is here now. He'll handle this, Izuku said. TCH. Why should we listen to you? Because we've been here fighting the villains, and actually doing well, 𝐲𝗏 said. And do you really think All Might needs our help? Izuku kept his eye on the warp villain while All Might was confronting Shigaraki and they were talking when the villain screamed, 𝗨𝗻. 𝐶HT, 𝐲𝗏 said at the same time Izuku said, to me. As he put up a shield using the force just in time to prevent ice chunks and shards from hitting them. They were close to where the 𝗨𝗻 had been encased in ice and it could have been bad. Bakugo didn't move closer, but Kirishima did. Thankfully Izuku was still able to make his shield large enough to protect them all. Bakugo looked a little shocked that the ice didn't hit him, even though he didn't move closer to Izuku. The 𝗨𝗻 emerged looking pretty terrible. Burns covered its entire body and it no longer had arms save for some stubs. All Might looked at it and laughed. This is your great weapon against me. It seems my students have already taken most of the fight of it. All Might turned to look at Izuku and his classmates. Thank you for your help, but I will handle it from here. He was a pro hero, this is what they did. Izuku nodded. All Might, it has multiple quirks. Super speed, strength, shock absorption and regeneration at least. We may have overwhelmed the regeneration, but watch out for the shock absorption. All Might nodded his thanks and Izuku started towards the entrance of the USJ without another word. After a second, Shoto and Kirishima followed him. Kirishima slowed as he saw Bakugo was not following and he said something to Bakugo, who growled and started towards the exit. Through the force, Izuku felt another warning and before he knew it, Kurogiri was standing directly in front of them, blocking their path. Do you really think I'm just going to let you go? The two of you have foiled too much of our plan for there to be no revenge. And your little friends can suffer with you. Say goodbye. Even if we cannot kill All Might, at least we can call it a partial victory with your deaths. You've been trying to stop us since we arrived here and you've had no luck. What makes you think this time will be any different? Izuku said. He didn't wait for an answer when he used all his might to force push the misty villain into the staircase. There was a loud clang and an enraged scream from the villain. Scatter! Izuku shouted to his classmates. If they separated, then there was a chance that the villain couldn't get them all at once. Even Bakugo understood the reasons and they separated. Izuku stayed where he was and reached out to the teleporter. The clang Izuku heard when he pushed him meant there was some physical form to the mostly incorporeal villain. Knowing this, Izuku reached for it in the force and grabbed the villain. Izuku had only force pushed him before. He looked towards where All Might was fighting the armless Nomu. It was using kicks and headbutts, but All Might seemed to be doing fine. Shigaraki was standing off to the side watching the fight, and so Izuku thought he would be a good target for the warp villain. Kurogiri went flying in the air and landed on Shigaraki, who hadn't noticed his partner speeding towards him. Izuku's classmates who were there used the distraction to run for the stairs. Izuku held back and Shoto slowed, looking at him. Izuku smiled. I'm going to keep the warper off you guys. Shoto looked like he was going to protest. Izuku said, make sure Aizawa and 13 are alight. Go, I'll be fine. You better be, Shoto said as he turned and followed Kirishima and Bakugo up the stairs. Izuku turned to face the villains again. Shigaraki and Kurogiri were working to get up, and when they did they turned to face him. You're so dead. I'm going to find you and everyone you care about and kill them all. Shigaraki said. This whole plan was foiled by you. It would have worked if you didn't damage my Nomu. The world would have been rid of the symbol of peace and chaos would have reigned. But no, a cheating high schooler with a stupid OP quirk had to come and ruin everything. You're dead, you hear me? Dead. Tomura Shigaraki, we should make our escape. The Nomu in this condition is no match for All Might. And sure enough, All Might was beating the Nomu handily. It seemed like the creature was no longer healing, so while many blows were being absorbed, the force of the impacts was slowing the other creature down. Perhaps All Might had overwhelmed that quirk just like the regeneration. All Might continued to hit it over and over again very quickly, and before too long the Nomu was flying through the glass ceiling of the USJ. All Might stood in a heroic pose staring at Shigaraki and Kurogiri. You've lost, fiends. Surrender and you shall be treated fairly. Izuku noticed that All Might was not moving at all. Not a single muscle. Why wasn't he going to capture the villains or knock them out? Izuku felt that All Might was weak from the force. You think you've won? This is only the beginning. You'll die, All Might. And society will fall. Shigaraki charged at All Might, who still didn't move. Izuku, not knowing what else to do, force pushed the villain back the way he came, causing the villain to scream in frustration at him. Kurogiri, get us. Before he could finish his sentence, gunshots sounded from near the entrance and suddenly Shigaraki was hit by several bullets in his arms and leg. The pro heroes were here. Kurogiri warped away with the injured and screaming Shigaraki. Izuku felt All Might's presence in the force waver and rushed to his side. Steam was coming off the hero and Izuku had no idea what to do. All Might, are you alright? Suddenly a tall skeletal man was standing where All Might had been, and he collapsed. Izuku caught him as a wall of cement blocked them from view. Is this normal? All Might let out a small laugh, but it turned into a violent cough with blood coming up. I'm fine, it is normal. That cough doesn't seem normal, Izuku said, reaching out with the force. He was still holding the man, gently guiding him to the ground. Izuku used the force and sent some healing to his teacher. It didn't seem to do much, but his presence in the force brightened a little bit. I'm feeling much better. I will tell you about this when I can, but for now, please keep it a secret from everyone. If anyone knew I was this weak, there would be panic. Of course. You have my word, All Might. The aftermath of attacks or missions like this was always annoying. The waiting was terrible. Thankfully no one had been harmed too badly. Some villains needed to stay in the hospital, but only 13 needed to be hospitalized from the hero's side of the fight. Aizawa-sensei was with Recovery Girl and would need to rest for a while, but other than that everyone was fine. From what Izuku could hear, the students all handled themselves very well. Most of those warped around the facility had been faced with villains, but all came out on top with a few struggles here and there. It appeared as if the villains didn't know their quirks and so they separated them randomly. Izuku was sitting next to Shoto on the ground near the bus. They'd been just sitting around for an hour now as police and more heroes arrived. A detective was working his way down the line of students, asking them for interviews and then leading them away. Finally, the detective got to Shoto and Izuku. You two were together for the entire time, weren't you? Izuku nodded, until the very end after All Might arrived, yes. Very well then. I'll talk to you both at the same time if you don't mind. Izuku looked at Shoto, who nodded. Very good. My name is Naomesetsu Kachi and my quirk is called Human Lie Detector. If you lie, I'll know it, so please be as honest as you can be. Shoto and Izuku spent some time telling what happened and the detective listened. He asked them questions that were generally directed to Izuku, who was being very careful to be honest without giving too much away. The Sith? Tsukachi asked with some urgency. Yes, detective. Shigaraki mentioned them several times, Izuku said. Did he say anything specific about them? No, just that the Sith said this plan would fail and would be mocking Shigaraki because of it. Thank you, please continue. Izuku finished going over the rest of the story, with Shoto adding some additional details here and there. The detective closed his notebook and said, well, you two did an amazing job today. A lot of pros would have been strong-pressed to do what you did. I also wanted you to know that you will not face any disciplinary action for using your quirks without a license. There are obviously extenuating circumstances here. I very much appreciate your time, and if you think of anything else you can reach me here. He handed them both cards with his information on it. They both nodded their thanks to the detective, who directed them to Principal Nizu. They walked over to the small mammal, who smiled at them when they approached. He was talking to Aizawa-sensei. Ah, two of the heroes of the day. Well done, you two. We just retrieved the video surveillance footage from today and you both did marvelously. UA is in your debt for helping as you did. Aizawa looked tired and said, don't ever do it again, at least not until you are licensed. It's not your place to die for the staff here. We weren't about to let you die, Sensei, Shoto said. Aizawa sighed. Your job is to come to class, do your work and go home. My job is to protect you and fight for you. Please remember that. Shoto looked like he was going to argue, but Izuku gently nudged the other boy's shoulder with his. Shoto glanced at Izuku, sighed, and kept his mouth shut. Their interaction caused Aizawa to quirk his lips into a small almost smile. Todoroki, your father has been notified and sent a car to take you home. You're free to go. Midoriya, we cannot reach your mother and your other emergency contact is in America. Do you know when your mother will be reachable? She's in Taipei for work, Sensei. She won't be back for a few days. I think she'd be in meetings right about now and will be for the foreseeable future. That does create a small problem. We cannot release you into your own custody. Especially with how the villain threatened you personally for your actions. I'm sure I'll be fine, Principal Nizu. Will you? Perhaps. But I'd feel more comfortable if you were in the care of an adult until your mother returns home at the very least. He can stay with me for a few days, Aizawa-sensei said, almost too quickly. I wouldn't want to put you out, sensei. Don't worry, you won't be. I have a spare room. I'm sure we'll find things to talk about. When will your mother be returning? She's scheduled to come back on Monday, and I am not sure if she will be able to get away before that. Of course. Taking you home until Monday is not an issue. We'll stop at your place on the way to mine to get some clothes and toiletries for you. Izuku looked towards Shoto, who shrugged at him, and he sighed. Okay, sensei, if you're willing, I am grateful. Izuku was forced to wait until all the students had been picked up from the USJ before he and Aizawa-sensei were able to leave. It was only about an hour longer, but Izuku was rather tired and hungry. They set off from the campus to begin spending the next few days together. They had the day off from school the following day, so it was a long weekend. Izuku reminded himself that the Force worked in mysterious ways and that perhaps he could use this time to convince his teacher he was not a vigilante. Or maybe he'd give something away and his teacher would realize he was a Jedi. Either way, this was going to be a weekend to remember. Aizawa-sensei and Izuku were walking down the road towards the Midoriya house. They had just left school and Izuku was tired. It had been a very long day and coming down off of an adrenaline high always left him tired. He wished his MSTR was home because spending the weekend with a teacher who was suspicious of him was not how he wanted to end his week. It would be fine though. Izuku could manage this weekend. He was kind of curious as to how Aizawa would test him and see if he's a vigilante. When they arrived, Izuku used his key and opened the door and invited his sensei in. They both took their shoes off and Izuku said, "Feel free to look around. I am going to run upstairs and get some clothes and things I need. Then we'll get some stuff from the kitchen and should be good to go." Izuku was 99% sure that there was nothing incriminating sitting out in the house. No signs of Jedi-ness anywhere an interloper could see. Izuku still didn't want to dilly-dally. "You don't need to bring your own food, kid. I have plenty." "Of course," Izuku said. "But I have all this fresh produce, I wouldn't want to go bad. Mom would be mad to come home to a house filled with rotten fruit and vegetables." His teacher, who seemed more tired than normal, didn't even try to hide his sigh. "Fine. It's some good stuff, Aizawa-sensei. I was going to make curry tonight. I should have enough ingredients to make plenty for both of us. You'd like." "You seem tired." "I'm always tired, and that would be nice, thank you. Just let's go. I don't live far from here, but it is a 20-minute walk at least." Izuku nodded and hurried upstairs to get his things, and then into the kitchen. Aizawa was in the same place Izuku left him, but he was pretty sure that the teacher wouldn't miss the opportunity to snoop a little. He led Aizawa back towards the front of the house and paused when he realized that his teacher was no longer following him. He turned around and saw the door to the dojo was open and Aizawa was looking inside. "Nice digs," the teacher said. "Thank you. It's mostly for my training, but my mom uses it too." "What kind of training?" "Your quirk is mostly mental. You'd tear that room apart." Izuku sighed. He hoped Aizawa would not be questioning him like this for every little thing. "I know some martial arts and do some weapon training. It's good to have a few tricks up my sleeves just in case. Your quirk is a great example of one which could completely wreck me if I didn't have a backup plan." "Fair enough. What weapons do you practice with?" "Swords mostly." "Useful. What tradition?" "A little of everything. I'd be interested in seeing you in action." Because of course, he would. Did they even have any swords in the house? He had his lightsaber, of course, but that would give away a few things Izuku would rather keep under wraps. "My mom locks the swords up when she's away, Just in case, Izuku said, lying convincingly, he hoped. Maybe some other time. Some other time, Aizawa agreed. They left the house and the teacher led his student down several smaller streets to a larger one, then back to a few smaller side streets. True to his word, the walk was a little over 20 minutes. Aizawa's apartment was in a good location for his commute to school, and it was more built up than the neighborhood that Izuku lived at. It was probably slightly closer to the school building than Izuku's own house, but further from the train station. The apartment building seemed pretty new. It wasn't fancy, very utilitarian, but there was a security guard in the lobby by the elevators who nodded at Aizawa when they walked in. Izuku noticed that there was a lot of security in the halls and stairwells of the building, and it gave him a feeling of being watched the entire time they were in the halls. It made sense that a pro hero would want a secure building to call home. When they entered the apartment, Izuku couldn't help but notice how Spartan it was. It had everything one needed to be comfortable: tables, chairs, sofas. But the furniture didn't fill the rooms and the walls were mostly bare. It didn't seem personalized at all. "This is a nice building, sensei. Did you recently move in?" "No, I've lived here for years." "Oh. It barely seems lived in." Sentimentality in home decorating is illogical. There are better things for me to do with my time. Sleep for one thing. He paused as if considering napping right there on the spot. "Go put the food away wherever you feel like. I'll get your room set up." Izuku nodded and put down his suitcase and went towards where Aizawa pointed. After unpacking, he moved back to the living room to wait, standing somewhat awkwardly. He noticed that Aizawa left his keys sitting out in the middle of the living room on an otherwise empty table. Izuku wondered if they were there as part of a honeypot scheme to catch him out. Izuku wasn't going to rise to any bait this weekend. No, he was going to be an angel. He pulled out his phone and saw he had unread messages. Group chat: friends. Uraraka, did you guys all make it home okay? Ida, I did. My father came from work and picked me up. Uraraka, good. I left with Midnight Sensei because my family lives far away. Ida, the staff of UA really care about their students. It's inspiring. To think such wonderful heroes are our teachers. Me, yeah, same. I'm with Aizawa because my mom is traveling for work. She's out of the country until Monday. Uraraka, is Aizawa okay? He seemed kind of banged up. Me, he seems fine but tired. Uraraka, the usual, then. Todoroki, I made it home as well. I will see you all on Monday. Uraraka, does that mean you aren't going to talk to us all weekend? Everything is set up. Your room is right through there, he pointed. I'm going to take a nap. Don't wake me unless it's an emergency. Izuku nodded and thanked his teacher as he was left alone standing in the middle of the living room. How had his life come to this? He sighed. He looked at the time and it was almost 6 p.m., so he decided to make dinner. The recipe that Izuku knew took about an hour and he had brought all the main ingredients he needed. He'd just have to borrow some from Aizawa's kitchen. Izuku was only somewhat surprised that his homeless-looking homeroom teacher had all that he needed for the curry. Seeing he had everything, Izuku cooked. He played around on his phone while it cooked and then he took a plate and ate. Aizawa said not to wake him up unless it was an emergency, so Izuku put the leftovers in the refrigerator for his teacher in case he woke up. He scrolled through his phone while eating, texting his friends. Todoroki had not replied to the chat since his last message, so maybe they wouldn't hear from him until Monday after all. Group chat: friends. Me, Aizawa has been sleeping since I got here. Uraraka, recovery girl makes you tired. Learned that the strong way at the entrance exam. Me, yeah, he seems good though. I'm sad he won't try my curry when it's fresh. Uraraka, you cook. Me, why is you in all capital letters? Do I not seem the type? Uraraka, no you do I guess, but I was just not expecting it. Me, my mom's away a lot so I often cook for myself. Uraraka, you're a catch. He was interrupted from responded by his phone ringing. It was 𝐬𝐴 𝐸 calling. He didn't know if 𝐲𝐻 had his house bugged or something, so was going to stay in character. "Hey, Mom," Izuku said as he answered the phone. She got the message. "Honey, are you okay? I got out of my meetings with a dozen messages. They said there was an attack." Izuku sighed. "Yeah, some villains got into UA where we were on our field trip. Most of them were just street thugs, but the leaders seemed serious. They had a monster of some kind. It was super strong and felt really evil." There was a pause. Izuku hoped his 𝐬𝐡𝐻 could read between the lines of his statement and see what he was trying to say. He was confident that she could. They'd been together a long time now. "I see. I really can't get home before Monday. They said you'd be with a teacher if I couldn't get in touch with them. Are you okay?" "Yeah, Aizawa-sensei took me to our house to pick up some stuff to stay with him. I'm glad I cleaned the house up before I left." She laughed. Izuku smiled at her double meaning, glad they didn't leave any lightsabers or Jedi paraphernalia around. "Then we came to his house. He doesn't live too far away from us. Nice place with a guest room. And you're safe." "Yeah." Izuku hadn't seen his teacher walk out of his bedroom but waved towards him when he did. "Let me talk to her." "Mom, Aizawa-sensei wants to talk to you." His mother agreed as Izuku handed the phone over to his teacher. "Mrs. Midoriya, I wanted to assure you that everything was fine. Your son was at the center of the activity in the battle and we felt there may be repercussions for the children involved." Izuku could not hear what his 𝐬𝐴 was saying, but Aizawa never really took his eyes off of him. "I see. I've seen those negotiations in the news. They are important. I can see why you would not be able to be home before they conclude on Sunday." There was another pause while Aizawa listened. "It's no problem. He can stay here. I need to go to UA's campus tomorrow and can bring him. I'm sure he has enough homework to keep himself entertained. If he doesn't, I am right here to give him more." There was another pause. Izuku was pretty sure he heard 𝐬𝐴 𝐸𝐻's laugh from the phone. "Traitor." "Yes, I'm sure. He may be a little trouble, but it's not like he's a vigilante or anything." Aizawa looked Izuku directly in the eyes when he said this. Izuku smiled slightly nervously and heard another laugh from the phone, and he wondered what Aizawa was getting from his 𝐬𝐴. Did he think she was Izuku's accomplice? Or had he given up the idea of him being anything other than a simple high school student? "Of course." Pause. "No problem." Pause. "I'll check before he goes to bed." Pause. "Yes, I will let you know." Pause. "No, please don't worry about that." Pause. "I'm sure." Pause. "Okay, here's your kid again." Aizawa handed the phone back over to Izuku and headed towards the kitchen. "He seems nice," 𝐬𝐴 𝐸𝐻 said. "He's a good teacher, but kind of intense." "I heard that," Aizawa said as he reached in to grab the curry. "I'm glad. I'm sorry this happened, but we'll figure it out when I get back into town." "That sounds good. How are your negotiations going?" "As well as can be expected. Progress is slow as ever, but having the deadline helps." They talked for a few more minutes and then hung up. "Your mom seems nice," Aizawa said, still eating curry. "She is, but super busy. Thanks for making dinner, by the way. I am going to crash and suggest you do the same. We're visiting UA in the morning. All Might wants to talk to you and I need to see Recovery Girl. Any idea why All Might is looking to talk to you?" I gave my word I wouldn't tell anyone about it. Is it about his injury?" "You know?" Izuku asked. "All the staff does. We help cover for him. Good instincts, not telling anyone though." "Thanks. Now go to bed. I might sleep tonight, so don't wake me unless the world is ending." With that, Aizawa walked out of the living room and shut his bedroom door. Izuku stood and walked back to the kitchen to do the dishes. Wouldn't do to leave his teacher's house messy. When he was done he walked to the guest room with his suitcase. Arriving in the room, it was nicely done up. Western-style bed, some furniture, a closet. A room like one of the hundreds Izuku had stayed in throughout his life. There was a very tall window with access to the fire escape. He dropped his suitcase and went to look at the view. Not too much to see, just an alleyway, but Izuku had to hold in a laugh when he saw that there was a thin piece of tape on the window, attached to the frame. A very middle school way to making sure no one sneaks out of the window, Izuku thought. Knowing Aizawa and the security of the building, there were probably sensors too, and the tape was just a warning. Part of Izuku wanted to remove the tape but not leave and see what his teacher did, but he was not suicidal. He would be a model guest for the next few days, even if that might confuse his teacher more. It was late, but not late enough for bed, so Izuku pulled out a book for his literature class and then meditated in bed until he fell asleep. The next morning dawned early with a loud knock on his door. Izuku was a light sleeper, from missions he'd been on and his training, and he was standing up almost before the second knock even hit the door. He was shirtless as the door burst open. "Get up. We're going for a run." There was a pause. "What the F happened to your chest?" Izuku was surprised and looked down and saw a large colorful bruise. "Oh, I forgot about that. The 𝗏𝗏 hit me a little bit before I got a grip on it at one point in the fight. And you didn't tell anyone. You could be more injured than you think." Izuku was not. His body was telling him it was just superficial bruising. "It's not that bad, just ugly." "That's not for you to decide." Aizawa seemed. "Did Recovery Girl look at least?" "No." One of the first rules of heroics you'll learn when you get to an agency is that you report every injury. Failure to do so can cost you or your fellow heroes their lives. "When we get to UA, Recovery Girl is going to look at it." "It's not that bad," Izuku insisted. Aizawa sighed. He mumbled something under his breath that Izuku couldn't make out. It may have been problem child, but Izuku was not sure. "Then there's no reason not to go and see Recovery Girl, is there?" Izuku knew he wasn't going to get out of this, so he just agreed and his teacher walked out of the room. Izuku looked at the clock beside his bed and saw it was 7 a.m. It was nice to sleep in a little, and if Aizawa-sensei wanted to run he must have felt better, which was a good thing. They left for the run after a short, healthy breakfast. It was not a long run, and Aizawa was not running very fast, probably due to his injuries. Izuku kept pace and tried to make conversation, but his teacher was seemingly not interested in talking. He pulled out his phone after showering and getting ready to go to UA. He wondered what All Might would want to talk to him about. Group chat, friends. Me, important note to save you embarrassment, Aizawa-sensei does not like to talk while he runs. He is also not a morning person, unsurprisingly. Uraraka, LOL, did you think otherwise? Me, not really, but he was also not a night person from what I saw last night. Maybe he's an afternoon person. Uraraka, Midnight Sensei is a total night owl. I woke up at 4 and she was still up. I went back to bed. She's still sleeping now. Ida, be respectful of our teachers. Also, I do not think there is any such thing as an afternoon person. Do not gossip either. Me, sorry, Ida. Was not trying to be rude. Uraraka, speak for yourself, I'm a light sleeper and she was moving around all night. Izuku smiled at his friends. He hoped Shoto was alright because he hadn't responded at all. Izuku decided to text him directly real quick. Shoto Todoroki me, hey Shoto, hope you're well rested and are planning for some fun this weekend. Izuku was surprised at the fast response. Shoto, you as well. I probably won't have much fun, my father wants to train with me. He heard I used my fire. Me, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to cause issues with your family. Shoto, you didn't. He is proud of me and it me off. I hated using his power. Me, promise me you'll always remember it's your power, Shoto. Not his. He shouldn't force you to do anything you aren't comfortable with. Shoto, that doesn't stop him. I've got to go. Bye. That was a little concerning, but Izuku hated texting because it was strong to get emotion out of it. He'd be sure to talk to Shoto on Monday. The walk to UA was short, and when they arrived, Aizawa-sensei walked him to the infirmary. Recovery Girl was just as angry, if not more so, at the fact that Izuku didn't mention his injury yesterday. Him saying, "If I ever catch you hiding injuries from me again, you'll be cleaning out bedpans until your children graduate UA." Izuku apologized and bowed low to the youthful heroine. His chest did feel better, but it wasn't that bad before. Aizawa told him where he needed to go to meet All Might while he had his follow-up treatment with Recovery Girl. Izuku walked through the empty hallways of the school. It was always strange being in an empty place that is usually so full. He arrived and knocked on the door. A deep voice said, "Come in," and Izuku opened the door. The room had a small lounge with a couch, some chairs, and a small table. All Might, in his thinner form, gestured at Izuku to sit down on one of the chairs near him. "It's good to see you well, young Midoriya. Yesterday was a trying time for your class. For you and young Todoroki especially. The two of you more than likely saved your teacher's life. You should be proud." "Thank you, All Might, but I was just doing what a hero is supposed to do." He let out a small laugh, changing to a cough with BLD coming up. "A fine answer. In this form, please refer to me as Toshinori. Toshinori Yagi is my given name." "I wondered that. I assumed your parents hadn't named you All Might." That caused the older hero to laugh again. "No BLD this time." "Indeed. I wanted to talk to you about my condition. I feel I owe you an explanation as to why I look this way if I am to ask you to keep my secret." "All me, Toshinori, you don't owe me anything. I will gladly keep your secret at no cost." The thin man smiled at him. "You are a fine young man, but please allow me this." Izuku nodded. "Several years ago, I fought a dangerous villain. Perhaps one of the worst of the era of quirks. He was very strong and he did this to me." Toshinori lifted his shirt and showed a terrible wound on his left side. "I lost several internal organs and was out of commission for many weeks." "Did you defeat the villain? Who was it? I heard Toxic Chainsaw laid you up for a while." No. It was not Toxic Chainsaw. It was a villain I have done my best to keep hidden from the public. I thought him dead, but recent events lead me to believe he is still alive." The man paused for a moment. When quirks were first coming into existence, there lived a man who received a powerful one, the ability to give quirks. He had a younger brother who did not seem to have a quirk, so the older brother used his power and forced one upon the younger. But it turned out the younger brother did have a quirk, a simple and useless quirk on its own. What we call invisible quirks today. It was the ability to pass down his quirk. To pass down his power from one generation to the next. The older brother was an incredibly evil man. The younger brother tried to reason with him, tried to bring him to the side of good, but his words did not work, and so he took up arms against his brother, with his new quirk. The older brother gave the younger a stockpiling quirk. It gave him great strength, but it was not enough. A stockpiling quirk is simple enough, but together with his original quirk, that strength could be passed down and grown. Eventually, the older brother killed the younger brother, but not before the power was passed down. Since then it has gone from generation to generation, growing stronger and stronger. A sacred torch passed down from person to person, gaining in strength with each passing. It is a power called One for All. Surely the villain would be dead now, right? That was hundreds of years ago. Alas, no. The quirk he was granted was not just the ability to give but also to take them. Izuku's eyes widened and said under his breath, "All for one." Toshinori immediately inflated to full-sized All Might, standing abruptly. "How do you know that name?" he demanded. Izuku was a little shocked at his teacher's sudden transformation. The force didn't scream any warnings of danger, but the tenor of the man's presence changed to the same overwhelming light it had been before. Several generations of a stockpiling quirk powering one man. That's why his presence felt like it was more than one person. Izuku thought quickly while the other man waited, taking a deep breath. He used the force to calm his nerves down. The force was telling him to be honest, but Izuku wasn't sure if that was a good idea. Izuku closed his eyes and reached out for more guidance. It kept pointing him towards the truth. He opened his eyes and nodded. I lied to get into 𝐻𝐸 𝐼𝐬. I do not have a telekinetic quirk, in fact, I am clinically quirkless. My boy, I've seen you fight, you defeated many villains with your power. I'm afraid I don't understand. The large hero had deflated back down to his smaller size as he looked at Izuku, who was reaching into his pockets while the other man was talking. Quietly he assembled the device while All Might watched him curiously. I have no quirk, as I said. Izuku ignited his green lightsaber as he stood in front of Toshinori. I am a Jedi Padawan here on a mission of grave importance to the Jedi Council and the world. We have information that led us to believe that Sith are working with villains here with plans to attack Japan's hero society, and beyond. I was sent to UA to infiltrate the school and stand ready should there be an attack. He turned his lightsaber off and sat back down. All Might was still standing and he looked flabbergasted. This was not how I expected today to go, Toshinori said as he sat back in the couch with his hand over his face. I get that a lot. Toshinori let out another laugh. I imagine so. I must say I have good taste. In what way? I originally asked you here to ask you to be my successor. I was set to pass the sacred torch of one for all down to you. You have all the qualities of the kind of hero I would like to pass it to. But I have worked with enough Jedi in my days to know that while I picked the best candidate, you are also one who won't take it. Izuku was momentarily overcome with humility that a hero of All Might's caliber thought so much of him, even barely knowing him. I am deeply honored to even be considered for this by you. Izuku paused. But I cannot take your power. Power for its own sake is anathema to your order. I do understand, my boy. Izuku nodded at the hero. It would be a temptation for me to use it, and there is a reason that all Jedi are quirkless. Quirks and the Force don't tend to work well together. All Might nodded. Indeed. Well, all my fretting and careful planning, and now I am back to the drawing board. I only hope my second choice will be as good as my first. Izuku blushed again. Now, who knows of your Jedi heritage here at UA? Just you for now. Aizawa-sensei thinks I'm a vigilante. I am pretty sure he has cameras in my room at his house making sure I am not doing anything illegal. All Might laughed again, with BLD this time. I have to say, I never once thought you might be a Jedi, young Midoriya. Yes, you seemed skilled, but I assumed your parents trained you or had you trained. In a way, they did. Izuku smiled dryly at the hero across from him. Well, you have kept my secret, and I shall keep yours. If there is anything I can do to help you, please let me know. Izuku smiled at the man, glad now that he was honest. Well, I am concerned about the sports festival. I know it is coming up soon, but I'm not sure if I should compete in it or not. My face is not unknown in the wider world. I could be recognized. Izuku paused. Plus I do have an unfair advantage over many of the competitors with my training and skill. All Might nodded. I understand. Have you discussed it with your MSTR yet? No, she has been out of town, but I will when she gets back. I imagine she will want me to sit it out too. But I would need a reason that will pass Aizawa's scrutiny as well as that of my classmates. All Might nodded. Let me think on it, young Jedi. Together we will face whatever comes our way. How does the Jedi saying go? The Force will be with us. It was Sunday afternoon and it was the last day of Izuku's stay at Aizawa-sensei's apartment. Izuku could not wait to get back home and away from his suspicious teacher. Izuku was not stressed out, per se, rather he was just tired of constant scrutiny. It's one thing on a mission where he could be attacked at any moment, but here in his teacher's apartment, there was no escape. After Friday and their trip to UA, there seemed to be a new addition to the apartment, hidden cameras. Every moment Izuku felt eyes on him. The cameras in the house were constantly watching him. No matter where he went except the bathroom, thank the force, he felt the itchy sensation of being watched. Izuku was good at pretending it wasn't happening, but he had an inkling that Aizawa knew he was pretending not to notice. This only served to make the constantly tired teacher more suspicious. Izuku had no idea how to win this battle. But Izuku was being good. He had not set one toe out of line. He helped with chores and did everything his teacher asked. He was a model guest and there was no way that anyone could tell him otherwise. By now Izuku thought he knew where most of the cameras were and avoided looking at them. Anyone who reviewed the footage would think that Izuku was an unaware teenager enjoying his time at his teacher's house. But the constant surveillance was getting to him. It was strong for him to quiet his mind and stop overthinking or planning for things that would never happen. Even when Aizawa went out on patrol late each evening, the feeling persisted. That could have been because his teacher never really went far. Izuku could feel him less than a block away. Aizawa's was a presence Izuku knew very well in the force after this weekend. He was stationary, seemingly standing on a building's roof nearby. Probably waiting for Izuku to leave to do vigilante things. Izuku had no idea why the teacher thought he would leave the apartment at any point, even if he was a vigilante. It was a surefire way to get caught. No one would be stupid enough to risk that, would they? Izuku was bored with watching TV. He wished he could do something more active, but he didn't want to ask in case it upset Aizawa, so he decided to text his friends. Group chat, friends. Me, I think Aizawa-sensei hates me, FYI Ida, I doubt that very much. He's a teacher and likes and respects all his students. Uraraka, except Bakugo, no one likes him. Uraraka, you are probably right Izuku. I can't imagine living with you is easy. Me, wow, thanks, Uraraka. I have been a perfect guest. I even cleaned the bathrooms yesterday to try to get him to warm up to me. Uraraka, you are trying too strong. Ida, I think it is admirable, what you're doing, Midoriya. Going above and beyond as a house guest. There's no way Aizawa-sensei could hate you. Izuku was about to respond when the door to the apartment slammed open and his teacher walked in looking unhappy. More unhappy than usual. Izuku swallowed involuntarily and then smiled at the teacher. Good evening, sensei. I didn't think you'd be back from patrol so early tonight. I hope it was successful for you. Aizawa walked into the living room, where Izuku was on the couch and sat in one of the chairs nearby. It was fine. Anything interesting happen here? Izuku thought for a moment. He ran over the question in his head a few times trying to figure out if it was a trick question. Not really. I was just watching television and texting my friends. Aizawa grunted and they settled into quiet for a few minutes, the drone of the television playing some action movie in the background. After a few minutes of quiet, Aizawa said, "You make no sense. I hope you know that, problem child." Problem child, again. Izuku wasn't sure what he did to deserve that title. I don't know what you mean, sensei. I apologize for being a problem, it is not my intention. I am trying to be as good of a house guest as I can be. You're too good. And it's not just being a house guest. Teenagers don't act like you. Hell, most adults don't act like you. You're too nice all the time. You don't snark me even when you're under considerable pressure. You barely show reactions to things that would send other 15-year-olds screaming. When you do act, you're far too skilled. It is easy to tell you have real-world experience. But there are no signs of you getting it at all. When we were at the USJ, I've watched the videos, you didn't hesitate when you ripped the arms off the Nomu. Twice. You jumped right in and you would have probably won on your own even if All Might didn't show up. That's not even mentioning getting Todoroki to use his fire, which is something I've talked to him about several times since the recommendation exam. You are a puzzle that I can't seem to solve, and I hate that more than pretty much anything else. It's driving me mad. Izuku was a little stunned that his teacher was confronting him like this. He knew it was frustrating for the teacher to not know all the answers, but this was a little much. Was all Izuku said while he tried to get his thoughts together. He opened himself up to the force and used its calming reassurance to center himself. Sensei, I'm sorry I am causing you this trouble. I am who I am. My experiences make me who I am, and I promise I have broken no international or Japanese laws. I have traveled a lot and I learned a lot along the way, and maybe I grew up faster than most kids. Moving a lot meant I didn't have many friends growing up, and the ones I did were temporary or long distance. It was strong, but I managed and am happy here. Is there anything I can do to prove myself to you? Aizawa-sensei looked at Izuku long and strong. It was an awkward stare and Izuku turned a little red under it. You know cameras are watching your every move here, don't you? Izuku blinked and scratched his neck. Well, I kind of felt like I was being watched occasionally. I figured it was because the whole building seemed very secure. There are guards and cameras everywhere in the hallways and stairwells. Izuku paused. I know you think I am a vigilante or whatever, but I'm not. Even if I was, do you think I'd do anything suspicious while staying in your home? Aizawa sighed. See, that's what I mean. You're a teenager. Teenagers don't think 5 minutes ahead of what they're doing. Teenagers are not poised and confident when being confronted by their sleep-deprived teachers. Should I be concerned, sensei? Do you need me to call someone for you? Izuku saw Aizawa clench his teeth. Izuku vaguely wondered if his teacher was going to snap or if this was an act to try to get him to confess. Izuku would not buckle, of course. So all he did was reach out with the force and sent some calming feelings towards his teacher while he looked on, concerned. The teacher sighed. No, it's fine. I apologize. Confronting you was not rational. I am either seriously underestimating your training and experience or misjudging you. Either way, I was out of line. You are a student in my care and I have not made your time here easy. I am going to turn off the security cameras in the apartment and I hope that after you leave here tomorrow you do not think less of me. Maybe Izuku sent too many calming thoughts towards his teacher. It was a rather dramatic reversal. Unless it was just an act. Was he for real or was he trying to throw Izuku off base? This teacher was too intense. Every day he spent here he thanked the force that Aizawa-sensei was not his Jedi 𝐸𝗡𝐻. He wouldn't survive his Padawan years. Of course I won't think less of you, Aizawa-sensei. You're doing your job and I appreciate everything you've done for me. Great, Aizawa said lighter than he had been before. Then he turned serious, but I will still be watching you. If you're hiding something I will find it. He paused and stared at Izuku for a few moments longer. I'm going to sleep. I need to patrol again at 2. School tomorrow, you should sleep. Of course, sensei. Be safe. Aizawa grunted and left Izuku alone in the living room. Group chat, friends. Me, yeah, I thought Aizawa was going to kill me there for a second but thankfully he just passed out. I am very much looking forward to being home tomorrow. Uraraka and Ida are typing. School was fine the next day. Not much happened other than the sports festival was officially announced. There was some concern by the students that it was a little soon after the USJ to be having the festival but the school decided to push forward with it anyways. He didn't have much time to talk to his friends except at lunch as training was pretty intense that day. Before he knew it, he was heading back to his own home. He was thankful that he was not going to be staying with Aizawa-sensei again. The man was fine, but he needed to get some good rest and Izuku there was probably not helping his sleep schedule. Izuku could use some peace too, it was always strong for him to sleep when he was being watched. The walk home was quick and he got in the door and his 𝐸𝗡𝐻 was in the kitchen. He went to see her and bowed, happy that she was back. Padawan. Welcome home. You too, 𝐸𝗡𝐻. I missed you. Staying with Aizawa-sensei was interesting. He seemed nice enough when we spoke on the phone. He is nice, but he is so convinced I am hiding something. He had hidden cameras on me all weekend, he interrogated me, tried to get me to sneak out and fight crime. MSTR, he taped the window of the guest room to try to catch me sneaking out, 𝐬𝐴 laughed. It sounds more like your weekend was almost worse than the villain attack. Good subterfuge training for you. At least the villain attack at the USJ was over quickly. It was a long weekend, 𝐬𝐴 groaned. She smiled at him. The council wanted to talk to you about the attack and what you learned. Oh, that reminds me. I thought they might want to. The sports festival is coming up soon at UA. I'm not sure I should participate, but I don't have a good way to get out of it that won't make Aizawa-sensei even more suspicious. We could plan the trip to see the council on the same day as the sports festival. But what will I tell UA? I'm off to Rome to report to my not masters on the Jedi Council. Keep your sass in check please, Padawan, 𝐬𝐴 said with a little smile. I can take care of that. We need to go to Rome to visit my dying mother and you need to come with me. I'm too afraid to leave you alone here in Japan after what happened last time I was gone, plus you want to see your Nana before she dies. Do you think that will work? I will be a helicopter parent, Padawan. And you can complain about it because you want to be in the festival, but I'm so unfair. How long will we be gone? Just a few days. I will get you a note for your teacher in a few days. He may call you or something, he's always suspicious of me. I'm sure it will be fine. We are going to Italy, so even if he checks our travel itinerary and with immigration control, he'll see we are leaving the country to where we said. He might follow us if we go. Padawan, if he does that we'll just tell him the truth. His suspicions of you currently work well for us because who would suspect someone your teacher, a pro hero, thinks is a vigilante is a Jedi? You really couldn't ask for better cover. I know. It's just strong being undercover when someone is after you to mess up for a completely unrelated reason. It's strong to stomach the irony, 𝐬𝐴 laughed lightly at the dramatics of her very teenaged Padawan. The life of a Jedi is seldom easy, Padawan. She paused. Did anything interesting happen while I was gone? All Might offered me his quirk. It's a really interesting one. But I said no and told him I was a Jedi. 𝐬𝐴 just stared at him for a moment. He wanted to give you his quirk. Yeah, All for One was involved with its creation a long time ago and can be passed on. Izuku told her the rest of the story as she listened quietly. This is not something we should spread around, Padawan. We will alert the council but no one else. Help All Might find the best successor he can. All for One being involved here does help to clarify matters. A missing piece. The Jedi were never fully convinced that he was defeated by All Might several years ago. There was nobody. His involvement could also tie into how the Sith are involved. Izuku talked to his MSTR for a few more minutes and finalized their plans to report directly to the Jedi Council when the sports festival was happening. Part of Izuku was sad to be missing the sports festival, but it was better for his cover if he was not going to be present. At school over the next few days, there was a lot of excitement for the upcoming sports festival. Izuku had not yet told anyone at school, save All Might, that he was not competing. He was planning to discuss it with All Might sometime soon. Thus, Izuku acted nervous and excited for the upcoming festival. Even Aizawa thought he was genuine, as Izuku freaked out a little bit when he was told he was the player representative and needed to give a speech due to his entrance exam score. In their foundational heroics course, they were working on quirkless combat. They had been separated into pairs and were working on hand-to-hand. All Might knew their approximate skill level, so total amateurs were not placed against black belts. Izuku had always held back a little in his hand-to-hand combat. He was not as skilled without his lightsaber as he was with it, but he was no slouch. Several of the students in the class had very high-level mastery of martial arts, and Izuku had not advertised his skills. Thus he was placed with Shoto, who was very well trained but more on quirk use than on martial arts. Izuku was glad to be with his friend. He felt kind of bad for Kirishima, who was facing Bakugo. Bakugo seemed to be in a worse mood than normal. Kirishima didn't seem to mind though. Izuku wandered over to Shoto and smiled at him. So, what kind of experience do you have in quirkless combat? A decent amount. My father made sure I was well trained, but I am not an expert like some of our classmates. Yourself. I have some skills in unarmed combat, but I am more comfortable in armed combat. Oh, do you know how to use a weapon? Yeah, I have been studying sword fighting since I was a little kid. Shoto nodded at him, accepting that. They moved towards one of the fighting rings and stood across from each other. Shoto made the first move, closing the distance between them quickly. Izuku decided to go on the defensive to gauge Shoto's level of skill. He was not disappointed. Izuku felt that Shoto was favoring judo moves and trying to get a grip on him. Even in quirkless fighting, Izuku saw that Shoto favored his right side. Too many years of focusing on that side of his body for his quirk. After a few more attacks from Shoto, Izuku decided to go on the offensive. He was not that skilled in judo, which was more of a sport than an attack form, so he fell back onto what he knew. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 was an ancient martial art that all Jedi learned. Tradition held that it was created to combat Jedi, but not many used it anymore. It was esoteric outside the Jedi Order but still practiced by some. Jedi learned it so they knew what to expect if they ran into it and how to counter its moves. It was a martial art that used the full body and incorporated strikes, grappling and throwing into the mix. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 attacks helped its practitioners by making fast attacks with a heavy emphasis on predicting what your enemy will do next. When a Jedi practiced 𝗧𝗪𝗀, there was the additional benefit of the Force to help predict what was coming next. A master of 𝗧𝗪𝗀 could often take out a person skilled in swordplay, even unarmed. Izuku is by no means a master, but he knew many of the moves and had an understanding of how to string them together. Shoto was on the defensive and seemed to be at a bit of a loss, as if he was expecting to get a better understanding of what Izuku would do once he started to attack. Shoto seemed to be unfamiliar with 𝗧𝗪𝗀, which meant Izuku had an edge. Or so he thought. It was as if a SWCH was flipped because Shoto suddenly seemed much more proficient than he had. He wasn't focusing on just judo moves any longer, he was incorporating moves from various other martial arts. And thus Izuku was on the defensive again, but he was not overwhelmed by Shoto's onslaught. Shoto was still favoring his right side, which Izuku decided to advantage of with a well-timed kick to his opponent's exposed left side. Shoto grunted and took a step back. You're leaving your left side too open, Shoto. Focus on covering there more or you'll leave me additional openings. Shoto nodded, looking a little ticked off. Izuku hoped it wasn't at him but rather at the fact he was leaving himself open. After a moment Shoto nodded again, indicating he was ready to go. This time Izuku was going to make the first move. Izuku attempted to do a charging move, where he was going to punch Shoto in the jaw. Shoto managed to block that. However, he was unprepared for the second part of the move, which involved a hit with both arms on the opponent's neck. Shoto backpedaled right away but composed himself quickly and made a lunge towards Izuku, which caught him off balance. On the defensive, Izuku used the momentum from Shoto's attack, which caused Shoto to overextend and stumble. Shoto stood up and smiled that small smile of his at Izuku. You seem to be better at unarmed combat than you let on. I am by no means an expert, but I can tell you outclass me. You're really good though. And I think you've got a solid grasp, and once you get a better feel for my style, you'll have better luck. Izuku was interrupted by a sudden attack from Shoto. He was not expecting that but saw a wry smile on his friend's face as he landed on the ground with a thud. Izuku let out a little huff of a laugh as he got back to his feet. If you wanted me to stop talking, all you had to do was ask. Where's the fun in that? Shoto asked. Fair enough. Good move too. They continued to spar until almost the end of the lesson, giving each other pointers and helping each other out. Izuku was pleased with how it went and felt he had honed his skills and that Shoto had too. They were interrupted as they prepared for another spar by a voice. If you are done fooling around with half and half, I can give you a real fight, nerd. Bakugo. Izuku was not interested in fighting the other boy and looked to All Might, who was walking towards the ruckus. He had a concerned look on his face. If All Might doesn't mind and 𝐬𝐻𝐻 can spar with Kirishima, I don't have a problem with fighting you 𝗵𝘃𝗀. But remember, All Might set us partners based on how he perceived our skill levels. Are you saying you're better than me? F that. I can take you any day. Now. We barely have time for one more fight, but as young Midoriya said, I assign the partners with great care based on your skills. I do not think this will be a good fight, young 𝗵𝘃𝗀. Screw that. Let's do it. I'll show you what a loser you are. Izuku sighed. If you insist. Todoroki moved to the side near where All Might and Kirishima were standing. It looked like they were going to watch the fight as opposed to fighting each other. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 looked vaguely interested and had a small smile on his face. Kirishima seemed a little worried, but Izuku wasn't sure why. I'm going to destroy you. Without your fancy quirk, you're nothing. I don't need a quirk to own you, so prepare to go down. That reminds me of an old saying I once heard, twice the pride, double the fall. Kirishima and Kaminari, who somehow appeared on the edge of the ring, made an odd ONG noise that Izuku associated with appreciating someone's trash talk. A few more groups stopped fighting and were gathering to watch the fight. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 stood across from Izuku and they both looked at All Might to count them down. Izuku had a few options here. He knew he could take his classmate down very quickly and easily. He could throw the match and let 𝗵𝘃𝗀 win, which was not appealing to Izuku at all. Or he could use the sparring match as a lesson for the other boy to improve his skills and attitude, but that didn't seem to do much last time. Maybe the best thing to do was show him he was not the biggest fish in the pond. Izuku reached out with the force and felt at peace with the world around him. All Might started the match and almost before he said, go, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was rushing Izuku screaming incoherently. It was not unexpected. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 probably wanted to end the fight quickly and he was a bit of a berserker. Neither of them were at their best, but as a Jedi, Izuku was trained to fight well even while sleep-deprived and exhausted. The other boy seemed to have lost a step due to the long afternoon of fighting Kirishima. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was telegraphing his move, it looked like a right hook was incoming. Izuku stepped slightly to the side and planted his feet firmly. As 𝗵𝘃𝗀's punch came towards him, Izuku grabbed the boy's arm and used his momentum to lift him into the air and flip him. He landed on his back on the padded floor with a loud thud. Before 𝗵𝘃𝗀 could react, Izuku moved one of his feet and placed it lightly over the other boy's throat, signaling the end of the spar. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was red in the face and steaming mad. What the F, that's it. One little move and you think we're done. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 tried to get up, shoving Izuku's foot out off of his throat and grabbing onto it, pulling Izuku down. Izuku was prepared for this and fell intentionally. When he landed he had pushed 𝗵𝘃𝗀 back down using his entire body's weight to hold him down. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was pinned and struggling. Young 𝗵𝘃𝗀, the match is over. You're both tired, save your fighting spirit for the sports festival. There you will come at each other much fresher. Izuku stood up carefully, both to not hurt 𝗵𝘃𝗀 and to be on guard in case the other boy wouldn't listen to his teacher. Izuku offered his hand to help the other boy up. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 scowled and didn't take the proffered hand but rather just stood up on his own and moved a few steps away from Izuku. You got lucky. All Might's right, I am going to enjoy taking you down at the sports festival in front of all of Japan. I'll look forward to our inevitable confrontations, 𝗵𝘃𝗀, Izuku said as he bowed. The other boy scoffed and stomped towards the locker rooms. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 walked over to him with that small smile of his still on his face. That was over faster than I thought it would be. He was tired. I'm sure if he was fresh it would have been a harder fight. Indeed, young Midoriya. A pro hero must always be cognizant of their condition before entering a fight. I'd like to speak to you after class today if you have the chance. Izuku nodded at him and moved with the rest of the class to the locker rooms to change out of their gym clothes. He said goodbye to his friends and went to meet All Might in his office. All Might, in his small form, looked up when Izuku walked into the room. Good to see you, my boy. You did well in class today. Izuku smiled at him. Have you talked with your MSTR about the sports festival? Yes, the council wants my MSTR and me to report to them in person soon. We will plan it for when the sports festival is taking place. We'll be saying my grandmother is ill in Rome and need to visit her before she dies. I'm supposed to be an angsty and disappointed teenager because of this. Izuku's face takes on a fake pout, causing All Might to laugh. I look forward to seeing that. I have news for you. I talked to an old mentor of mine. I asked him if he would be willing to take on a student for an internship. He's very intense but trustworthy. I did not explain your full situation or your status. I leave that to you if you wish it. That's great, thank you All Might. Not a problem, my boy. Even hero students who do not get any internship offers will have an internship. My old mentor, Gran Torino, is who will take you on. He has worked with Jedi in the past, and since you'll be living with him for a week, having someone who you can trust is important. Tell me about it. Living all weekend with Aizawa was intense. He is so suspicious of me. I thought he was going to have an aneurysm towards the end. All Might let out a loud laugh, worthy of his bigger form. Indeed. I will try to speak to him again while you're away to dissuade him from being too overtly suspicious of you. He's mentioned it at staff meetings several times. Izuku sighed. I don't think anything will change his mind. Even if he saw me pull my lightsaber out and fight some villains with it, he'd still ask for my license first thing. I'm sure that's not true. You should consider telling him. My MSTR and I thought of it, but his suspicion of my vigilante activities provides a nice distraction to my actual status as a Jedi. Ah, hiding in plain sight. He'll be very put out with you when the truth does come out. I know, but it is what it is. All Might and Izuku talked for a few more minutes and then said their goodbye. He walked out of the mostly empty school, planning to head straight home. Before he could even leave campus he hears a shout, "Hey nerd!" Izuku turned around and saw Bakugo walking towards him. He held in a sigh. Hello again, Bakugo. You must think you're such hot SHT. All Might's favorite. TCH. You keep looking down on me, showing off. You better watch out, you're going down at the sports festival. None of this quirkless fighting SHT. I'm going to win. Izuku paused. The other boy was up in his face. Bakugo, I apologize if you feel that I am looking down on you. I am not. You are a very strong person and I think you're going to be a very strong hero. Yeah, I will be. Izuku knew that he didn't need to say anything more, but maybe the other boy needed to hear some things. Izuku was not one to miss an opportunity to meddle. I am not saying this to tell you off or anything, it's just an observation. Being a strong hero is not always the same as being a good hero. Not all good heroes are strong, and not all strong heroes are good. The best heroes, like All Might, are both. I think you have the capability to be both too, but you need to work at it as we all do. That's why we're in hero school, right? Bakugo was making a noise kind of like growling while baring his teeth. He didn't seem any angrier than he had been before, and maybe he was listening to what Izuku had said. I don't like you. You're always acting like you're better than everyone. That you know more. That you've done more. And the worst part. I can tell you know your SHT. It me off. But I know it will feel even better when I beat your butt at the sports festival. Yeah, I'm looking forward to fighting you too, Bakugo. But don't think I'll make it easy for you. Bakugo grunted and walked away. Izuku felt kind of bad for saying that when he knew he was going to be missing the festival, but what else could he do? He hoped they could at least maintain a working relationship with each other. The rest of his trip home was quiet. 3 days before the sports festival, Izuku was standing in his empty classroom at lunchtime handing a note to Aizawa-sensei. Izuku tried to look like a good student who was at the same time disappointed about something. He had made sure to be quieter than normal all day today and he was sure his friends had noticed and were concerned. Your grandmother is ill and so you're missing the sports festival. Aizawa-sensei said, sounding incredulous. I guess so, Izuku said. You realize this is one of the biggest events of the school year. That heroes from all over Japan will be watching, looking for future talent. Izuku took a deep breath before responding, yes, Aizawa-sensei. And there's no other time you can go visit her. The doctors think she will be passing away in the next few days. I am sorry to hear that, Midoriya. And I understand why you need to go. If I can ask, you don't seem yourself today. Izuku sighed. My mom and I fought. I didn't want to miss the sports festival and she said I had to go with her. I would have been fine here, but she said it was important to see Nana before she dies. So back to America for a few days. No, my grandmother lives in Rome. She retired there or something. You get around, don't you? Yes, sensei. Well, I won't say I am not disappointed, but that's life sometimes. Since there's no school for a few days after the festival, academically it is a good time to miss a few days. And you'll be able to make a bigger splash next year. When are you leaving? Aizawa-sensei was taking this a lot better than Izuku thought he would. His grandmother is dying, and Aizawa is not heartless. But still, it seemed easier than he expected it to be. Yeah, I will be leaving after school today. I should be back in class on Monday or Tuesday. Alright, I'll file this with the office. They may call your mother to confirm this is accurate. Now get to lunch, I'm sure your friends are missing you. Thanks, sensei. What do you mean? You can't be serious. But it's the sports festival. Guys, calm down, Izuku said as his friend group went a little crazy when he told them why he was not acting like himself today. Well, Tsu, Ida, and Uraraka all had. Momo and Shoto were quiet. Tsu, Ida, and Uraraka all talked over each other, almost shouting their distress that he was going to miss the festival. That's a shame, Shoto said. Why are you missing it? Izuku sighed. I have to go to Italy tonight. My grandmother is not doing well and the doctors think she could pass away any day now. So Mom and I are going to see her. I'm so sorry you have to go through this, Momo said. Everyone else chimed in with similar sentiments. Thank you, I am too. It's just bad timing, I guess. I'll watch the live stream. It will be like 2 a.m. local time, so I should still be able to see you guys kick butt. It won't be the same though. Uraraka said. Izuku smirked and sat back in his chair. Well, on the bright side, without me there you guys have a better chance of winning. That caused a bit of an uproar among his friends and the rest of lunch passed quickly, with friendly banter. Coming back to Rome always felt the same to Izuku. Even after a 13-hour flight from Tokyo, Rome felt like home. Reporting to the council had been easy, but long. They could have done it via a secure phone call honestly, but it was nice to have a good excuse to visit the temple. Izuku had run into one of his friends at the temple too and they hung out for a while before she had left on a mission. He received a strange text message from All Might saying Aizawa-sensei was still suspicious of him and had confronted All Might about knowing his secret. He said to watch his back. But what did that mean? Aizawa wouldn't be in Rome or anything. And even if he was, it was a huge city. Right. The sports festival was going on now. Izuku had decided to stay up until it started since 2 a.m. was a terrible time to wake up. He wandered out of the temple and down to the Roman Forum to was streaming the fights. He always loved sunrise over the Forum, and he'd probably be sitting there in a few hours as the sports festival wasn't over quick. The time difference was annoying, but he told his friends he'd watch it and has been texting them as he did. His earbuds were in place and he could hear the commentating of Present Mic and, surprisingly, Aizawa-sensei. Izuku had half expected his teacher to follow him to Rome. Thankfully his full-time job prevented that. There had been a race in which Shoto won first place followed up by a team cavalry battle. Each winner of the race was assigned a points value and Shoto had 10 million, which was more than all the rest combined. Shoto successfully defended the headband from Bakugo and the others in the second round, much to Bakugo's anger. The third round was a tournament of one-on-one fights. It looked like most of his friends had gotten into the third round and Izuku was happy to be cheering them on. The bracket had some very interesting fights on it. There were a few names Izuku didn't know. Some seemed to be Class 1B students, but a few were total unknowns to him. Izuku thought that Shoto or Bakugo was probably going to win. He assumed that the teachers might feel the same as they were in different sections of the bracket and would not be able to fight until the finals. His friends had some good fights. Tsu and Ida got to the second round, Yaoyorozu to the third, and Shoto to the finals. Uraraka put up an amazing fight against Bakugo, but he was too strong in the end and survived her sneak attack. Yaoyorozu and Ida fought each other in the second round, and Yaoyorozu was the victor there. They both fought well. The final was explosive. Bakugo was going very strong, but not able to land many hits on Shoto, who could use his fire and ice to great effect. Shoto was keeping his distance, and his abilities were very good for long-range fights. It looked like they were talking to each other. Or Shoto was talking and Bakugo was screaming. The audio did not come through his phone and lip reading was too strong with the angles. He'd ask Shoto about it later. It looked like Bakugo was going to launch a major attack, but Shoto sent a small burst of flame towards the other boy and caused a premature explosion. Izuku winced as Bakugo was knocked back and on the ground. He looked very angry and burnt but got up quickly to dodge an incoming iceberg. Before Bakugo could get his footing, Shoto shot out more ice, trapping the other boy. Bakugo started blowing up the ice with his explosions, and Shoto paused and waited. When Bakugo was bending over to try to break out his feet, Shoto sent more ice encapsulating the other boy. It looked like Bakugo was stuck now by his hands and feet in ice. Izuku wasn't sure if he'd be able to get out of this one. Midnight Sensei shouted over to Bagwo to see if he was able to continue. His sweat was probably having trouble forming at this point due to the cold. Izuku couldn't hear what Bakugo said, but Shoto was declared the winner of the tournament. Izuku changed apps to text his friends. Group chat, friends. You guys were so awesome. Congrats Shoto. Uraraka, I got out in the first round and not sure how awesome that was. Uraraka. Don't say that. You made it to the top 16 students and lost to the silver medalist of the whole tournament. You're going to be flooded with internship offers, I'm sure. Ida, indeed. It seems our entire friend group made it to the final round. I was disappointed I did not get further, but Yaoyorozu beat me honorably. Momo, you fought well, Ida. Bakugo was a very tough competitor, Uraraka. Tsu, I knew I'd have trouble with Todoroki. Ice is not my strong suit. Neither is fire. Karo. Where is Shoto? He was amazing. When he made Bakugo's attack blow up in his face. Perfection. Momo, I saw him speaking to his father after the award ceremony. Oh. Well, if you see him, tell him I said congrats. I need to go to bed. Uraraka, I forgot there was a time difference. Yeah, it started at 2 a.m. in Rome. Ida, 2 a.m. You must not have gotten much sleep. You need to make sure you get plenty of rest. I didn't get any sleep, I just stayed up. Sun is rising now, I am in the Roman Forum. It's kind of amazing honestly. Tsu, how's your grandmother? She passed away last night. We're going to have a funeral for her in a few days and then be back home. Hoping for Tuesday. Izuku put his phone away as he got a few notifications from his friends expressing their condolences. He walked back towards the Jedi Temple. While they were in Rome, he and his MSTR were writing reports and being debriefed by the council and they were very curious as to the revelation that All for One was involved, worried the council enough to dispatch another Jedi to Japan for backup if it was needed. Sith working with All for One meant trouble. The next few days passed quickly and before he knew it, it was time to return to Japan. Izuku felt he would miss the temple, as he always did, but Japan and UA were starting to feel more like home too. He felt that he'd be very sad when the mission was over.